What's up, everyone, and welcome to Let's Be Clear with Just Wayne. Yes, we're still working on the title of this, but this week we're going to be covering the fact that thousands more troops are being deployed to the Middle East while the Trump administration still does not call this war a war. We're also going to be talking about J. Cole's explanation tour as he continues to go on podcasts and seems to leave more questions than answers. Finally, we're going to talk about the nitty-gritty of the new executive order from Trump about mail-in ballots. What does it mean, and what are we going to do about it? We're going to cover a whole host of other topics as well. And so check out this clip and let's talk on the other side.
There is nothing that I wouldn't do.
For your attention, please. Can I have your attention, please? Everybody just look at me. Everybody just look at me. I day trade attention. Shout out to Gary V. Respond to every mention. You can find me on your FYP. Before 2020, I was doing the...
Welcome, everyone. It has been another week that is, whoa. And so before we get into our main topics today, I kind of want to cover some of the things that are happening in the news because it's been a lot. And so welcome to this week's edition of The Rundown. Somehow, the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives has been more drama off screen than it has been on screen, which to this point should be expected. It's what they do. It's who they are. And TMZ reported in the midst of all the other things that are happening that Jesse Draper and Jordan are getting a divorce and that there was a restraining order involved. And so naturally, Jesse had to run to call her daddy to talk about this.
I'm getting divorced. I told him I was going to file. He ran to the courthouse and straight to TMZ to make it look like it was his decision. If he's going to play dirty, do you want to talk about the escorts? Do you want to talk about the orgies? I'm ready to tell the full story because I have nothing to hide.
Orgies? Jordan's out here having orgies? I mean, it just tells me he's finally living Mormonism the way that Joseph Smith intended. And in addition to that, we also got reporting that both Jesse and Chase made out at a party. And at this point, Chase is just out here collecting Mormon wives like he's Thanos. In other news, Apple Music hosted a versus between Tyrese and Tank. And listen, it was a great time, a great night for R&B, two incredible artists, incredible singers with amazing special guests that happened. But the number one star of the entire show was that turtleneck.
Shiny, oh, you got a suede lapel, but still got on that turtleneck. You recycle that turtleneck. You should take off that turtleneck. Anytime you feel like a takeoff, that turtleneck, you gon' suffocate in this verse. Turtleneck.
Speaking of R&B, Usher was interviewed by Forbes this week talking about being an entrepreneur. And for some reason, in the middle of that interview, decided to offer up his opinions about his former housemate, Diddy.
We can't ignore the reality of the history. But in many ways, I think certain people are prosecuted and maybe not recognized for the greatness, that they offer. I don't have anything negative to say about Sean Combs because my experience was not what the world has seen and how he's been, misrepresented.
Misrepresented is doing a lot of heavy work there. And listen, I'm as big of a fan of Confessions as anybody else, but we could have gone without Confessions Part 3. Speaking of Confessions and Usher, one of his former friends, shall we call it, Chili, was outed this week as potentially being MAGA. In addition, Nick Cannon was interviewed by Amber Rose and talked about why he had left the Democratic Party and has become conservative. And there are a lot of people online who are complaining about the fact that they are potentially not going to go see this new TLC tour or having to put away their TLC music. But lucky for all of us, no one is complaining about having to put away Nick Cannon music. In other news, there was a massive set of protests that happened over the course of this past weekend. It is reported that over 8 million people showed up to these protests. And while that is an incredible number, there's also been some conversations online about whether or not these protests themselves were just performative. And to be clear, there are people who said that they showed up to the No King's Day protest in Minneapolis because it was a free Springsteen concert. So there is some performance to politics and to protests. But if we're being real about it, there are some performances that are more cringy than others. He really said, "You gonna get this political crump, cuz." Now, during the No King's Day protest, it was reported that military helicopters flew over the protest to intimidate the protesters. But once again, 8 million people tells you these folks were not intimidated. But then some of those helicopters have then reportedly flew over to Kid Rock's house. Because if we know anything based on the Epstein files, it's that this king that we have likes kids. And in the aftermath of that, the Army pilots were put on suspension pending an investigation. But then Pete Hegseth stepped in and he was like, no punishment, no investigation, carry on, pirates. That's what Pete Hegseth tweeted, which, if we're being real, does not sound like military policy. It sounds like the thing that you would say to a group of friends right before you order a round at the bar. I get it. Of course, Pete Hegseth would say that. And finally, Kristi Noem, who, as a Minnesotan, I've felt ways about for a very long time. What I was not anticipating on my bingo card was Kristi Noem's husband, Byron Noem, being outed as participating in bimbification kink. And just, I'm sorry in advance for the image that we are about to show you. But these are the pictures that leaked of Kristi Noem's husband, Byron Noem. And can I just say, you're going to have titties, don't let them be lopsided. And the reality is, I'm not going to kink shame over here. We are kink positive here at Let's Be Clear, but we are going to name hypocrisy. And there are way too many jokes and too little time. And so can we just run through a couple of them real quick? The wild thing is that Kristi Noem has been criticized for cosplaying a Border Patrol agent. And the whole time, her husband was cosplaying Stormy Daniels. Boom.
Roasted.
Now, Kristi Noem has also famously gotten a lot of work done. And it is wild to get that much work done and still be the second biggest bimbo in your own house.
Boom. Roasted.
There are reports that one of the people who outed Byron Noem was an immigrant sex worker. So I guess Kristi Noem was right. Immigrants really did take one of her jobs.
Boom. Roasted.
And finally, I don't know what the bigger issue is for the administration right now. Byron Noem's leather hot pants or J.D. Vance's affinity for leather couches.
Boom. Roasted.
This has been The Rundown. And in the world that we live in right now, the Trump administration is going to find ways to dominate headlines. If we're being real, in the time it took me to write this episode, we had to rewrite a portion of this episode because more stuff happened, and more stuff happened today while we're filming this. And so we're going to cover the things that we meant to cover, but this administration is making it difficult for us to keep up. But that's why you follow me here on my TED Talks. Now, the New York Times is reporting that an additional couple of thousand, 2,000 troops have been deployed into the Middle East, bringing the total number of troops that are in the Middle East up to 50,000, which is 10,000 more than normal. Which brings us to this week's edition of Do You With the War?
Do you with the war?
Now, by all indications, we are at war with Iran. We have been at war with Iran for the entire month of March. But for some reason, every time you bring up the word war to anyone in the Trump administration, they act like a man who you've just called your boyfriend for the very first time.
Number one is they want to deflect from all of the tremendous success that we're having in this military operation. I won't use the word war because they say if you use the word war, that's maybe not a good thing to do. They don't like the word war because you're supposed to get approval. So I'll use the word military operation, which is really what it is. It's called a military decimation. But they don't like the good public.
And so here we are. We've been bombing them. We've deployed troops into that area. $200 billion have been requested. And like I said, you start to feel like the woman who's like, you're my boyfriend. We text every day. You've met my parents. You stay at my apartment. We FaceTime when we don't see each other. If this isn't a relationship, then I don't know what is. And if this isn't a war, then I don't know what is. But it seems like the entire administration is treating the war the way the people in Kanto treated Bruno. Like, we don't talk about war. No, 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 no. And the reality is this. During the Vietnam War, another one of those occupations we didn't need to be in, Congress passed a war powers resolution that said that the president could not unilaterally send troops somewhere without the approval of Congress. And that passed in 1973. Interestingly, Richard Nixon, who was the president at the time, vetoed it, and Congress overrode his veto. And so you would think that at this point, now that we've been at war with Iran for almost 4 weeks now, that Congress would step in and be like, no, we're not doing this anymore. But Mike Johnson then enters the chat.
Mr. Speaker, is there at any point you think Congress will need to give congressional authorization?
So, you know my background. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I'm a jealous guardian of Article 1 in the legislative branch. My understanding of the law, and has always been, and this is the tradition and the way the law has been used and observed over many decades, the president was acting well within his authority. What I just told you is the scope of what happened here and the situational awareness that they had at the time to make this decision. It's not a declaration of war. It's not something that the president was required, because it's defensive in nature and in design and in necessity, to come to Congress and get a vote first. And if they had briefed a larger group than the Gang of Eight, there's a real threat that very sensitive intelligence that we had, might have been leaked or something. So this is why the Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces has the latitude that any commander-in-chief, any president always has, because they have a set of information that is sensitive, timely, and urgent, and they have to be able to act upon it.
So Mike Johnson has one job, and that's not Speaker of the House. Let's be clear. Mike Johnson, if he was being Speaker of the House, would have brought forward a war powers resolution. Mike Johnson's job is to make sure that the House does not get in the way of what Donald Trump wants to do. And if you watch it, you can recognize that there has never been a Speaker of the House that has ever fraternized this much with the president. And I've never seen Congress be on recess as much as they are now. I mean, ultimately, Mike Johnson's got the perfect fifth grade boy deal. Like, he gets to be on recess and go into wrestling matches, and in exchange, he just does whatever Donald Trump wants.
Donald Trump.
I wish the people at home could hear the sound in this room. It's so loud in here. It is so loud.
So we have a Speaker of the House who won't act. And we have a Secretary of Defense, even though he likes to call it war, who sounds all the time like he's trying to sell you a store, like he's trying to sell you a sword at a mall. Come on, back up. So we have a Secretary of Defense who likes to call himself Secretary of War, who likes to sound like he's selling you a sword at a store in the mall.
I witnessed lethality. Maximum lethality, not tepid legality.
And so somebody in the administration has to explain to me how Iran is not going to turn into the next Afghanistan or the next Vietnam. JD, you got anything you want to add?
Well, I think one big difference, Phil, is that we have a smart president, whereas in the past we've had dumb presidents. And I trust President Trump to get the job done, to do a good job for the American people, and to make sure that the mistakes of the past aren't repeated.
So we're depending on the intelligence of a president who loudly talks about the fact that he has taken multiple dementia cognitive tests. That's what we're depending on?
You know, I'll say it right now. I say it because no press never reports it. I'm the only president that ever took a cognitive test. I took it 3 times. It's actually a very hard test for a lot of people. It wasn't hard for me, but it's a cognitive test. It starts off with an easy question, and by the time you get to the middle, it gets tougher. By the time you get to the end, very few people can answer those questions. They get very tough mathematical equations.
This would be the greatest television show of all time if it wasn't real life. This administration would be excellent television if it were not real life. And it would be easy to be like, oh my gosh, it's just a group of unserious people who are doing absurd things. But the absurdity also lands with high levels of just evil. Because when Trump was asked what it would take to end the war with Iran, he had this to say.
Does Iran have to make a deal for the U.S. to end its operation in Iran? And
No,
have you spoken,
no.
and
Iran
have you
doesn't
spoken
have to.
directly?
Iran doesn't have to make a deal. No. Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of people. It's a new regime. They are much more accessible. They are right. You know, they said we have a present for you, Mr. President, out of respect. No, they don't. You asked me a question. No, they don't have to make a deal with me. When we feel that they are, for a long period of time, put into the Stone Ages, and they won't be able to come up with a nuclear weapon, then we'll leave. Whether we have a deal or not, it's irrelevant.
Does Iran?
I thought this was an excursion, or maybe even an opportunity to boost Trump's ego. But that sounds like an extermination. He is simply saying that we are bombing them for the sake of bombing them. There's nothing that Iran can do. And reminder, last year, we said that we completely obliterated their entire nuclear program and sent them into the Stone Ages. And now, American troops are dying, and we're sending more troops just to bomb them for the love of the game, for maximum lethality. And the reality is that Republicans in Congress are now floating the idea of making more cuts to healthcare in order to fund the war they won't call a war. So they cut healthcare last year in order to give that money to ICE and DHS for the express purpose of deporting brown people. And now they want to put money into this war to bomb brown people. That's where we are. It would be so much easier to just sit back and be like, oh my gosh, this is like 30 Rock, Parks and Rec, The Office. But people are not living this. They're not surviving this reality. This is evil. And our taxpayer dollars are being siphoned for the express purpose of destroying people, deporting people, detaining people. I live in Minnesota. We were terrorized. People died. If you know anyone who is on any government assistance, it got significantly harder. If you know anyone who works for a company that has government funding, they had to make cuts because it got harder. Everything about life is more difficult. And they're running around talking about spending more money. Inflation is up. The cost of gas is up. The cost of food is up. The cost of living is up. The quality of life is down. Unemployment is up. Everything is going terribly. And they want to divert money to something they won't even call a war. So when we look at what the Trump administration is doing and watch them gaslight us to believe that America is doing great, while we actively do everything to not only hurt our standing in the world, hurt people around the world, but make life more difficult for us. I don't even think it matters anymore if we call this a war, because ultimately what we're doing is creating a situation we're all waking up and recognizing, in the words of Kristen Bell, this is the bad place. This has been Do You with the War.
Do you with the war?
In other news, you all know I'm a hip hop fan through and through. And we had a situation a couple years ago. We're coming up on the two-year anniversary now of one of the biggest moments in hip hop, in which J. Cole and Drake released First Person Shooter. Kendrick released Like That. J. Cole released 7 Minute Drill. Now, recently, J. Cole has been going on a lot of podcasts trying to explain himself and help everyone understand the decisions that he made. And so, first things first, rest in peace, Uncle Phil. That is one of the more iconic lines from any of J. Cole's songs. It was from 2014 Forest Hills Drive, which J. Cole names that on the Fall Off, disc 1 is going back to that moment right after Forest Hills Drive has been released, and he goes back to Fayetteville. And J. Cole goes on to describe what the Fall Off is in the grand scheme of his albums, and it helps to put some things in perspective for us.
The Fall Off, which is the continuation of the J. Cole story. Jermaine's life story in the form of this J. Cole character. So when you hear me say, this is a suicide note, come here, look what I wrote. I'm about to kill. It's me basically saying, like, man, I'm done with that. I took you to the end. Yeah.
So he is saying here, Jermaine is him. J. Cole is a character. And this is something that he is really parsing out throughout the rest of his interviews, is that what you're hearing on these records is the character that he has created in order to be hip hop. And I think that it's really, really important that we recognize that this character is a byproduct of what he believes he has to be in this hip hop space. And what is difficult for me as I listen to J. Cole more and more, as I listen to these interviews, is the reality that we, and I'm saying we, myself included, have clowned Drake for years because Drake's not authentic. Drake puts on the culture. Drake is biracial and was raised by his white mom, right? Drake grew up in the nice part of town, right? Drake went to the good schools, right? But he puts on the culture in order to justify his position in hip hop. We have made those arguments. And the beef, I think, was encapsulation of making that argument about Drake. But we don't make those same arguments about J. Cole, who is also biracial, also raised by a white mom, also ended up growing up in the nice part of town, and talks about this on Port Antonio, like being angry about growing up in the nice part of town when his white mom got remarried to a white man. So he grew up in a household with 2 white parents. Ends up graduating with a 4.2 GPA, which I want to name. I am a suburban Black kid. I went to a private high school. I went to a private college. This is not about you having to have a poverty story, right? J. Cole ends up going to St. John's after graduating with 4.2 GPA from high school. Like, he goes to a private college, a great school, right? When you dig into the details of J. Cole and then you listen to J. Cole, you recognize that there is actually a delineation between those two people. And we don't apply the same lens of critique on J. Cole that we have applied to Drake. And I'm going to say right here, right now, I apologize for that, because I have been hypercritical. And I need to name, as a suburban Black kid, I am hypercritical of Black folks who front, ultimately. Like, I'm never going to sit back and be like, yeah, you know what I'm saying, where I come from back in the 612. Like, fam, I grew up in the suburbs. I lived in North Minneapolis for 2 seconds, and I could be like, nah, I'm from North Side. I could say that, and it's technically true. But if you dig at the story of Just Wayne, you're like, he grew up, you're not a gangster. Your real name's Clarence. And Clarence grew up with both parents. And Clarence's parents have a real nice marriage, right? Like, you went to Cranbrook. That's a private school. Like, that reality, right? Like that's J. Cole, right? That's Jermaine. And I think that's the delineating factor here is that Jermaine is a good kid who's put on the persona of J. Cole in order to make it in hip hop. And we've said Aubrey was wrong for putting on the persona of Drake. And we have not kept that same energy. And I apologize for that. Because as we start listening to J. Cole tell stories, we realize that he's telling stories about things that his partners have experienced. He's talking about violence he's never done. He's talking about experiences he's never had. And he goes on further to not only talk about the fact that these experiences aren't his, but also that he has said stuff about himself in order to meet the needs of the audience that are not really his. Because when he is asked about being the greatest rapper, this is what he had to say.
No, you said something about
getting a heads
no,
up.
Schoolboy, that's a complete lie. No, you said something about
getting a heads
no,
up.
Schoolboy, that's a complete lie.
Okay.
Ask Schoolboy Q. That's just like internet, like, yo, that's a straight lie. And there's many of those.
So we're going to get into this in a second, but him bowing out of the beef was his decision. Nobody came and talked to him. And the reality is, he doesn't think that he's actually the greatest. I think that should be the next clip.
Ask me in real life, do I think I'm the best rapper alive?
Do you think you're the best rapper alive?
It's a named Black Thought that exists. It's a named Lupe Fiasco that exists. It's that on any given day, even my peers, a Drake or a Kendrick, where it's like, yo, I know on any given day I can show up to the studio and get it 80. But I know they can show up on any day in the studio and give me 80. And I might only have 30. But when I put on that cape, like, that's how I try to attack. And have there been things and moments and verses where I'm writing this, I'm like, I know I'm not with this. Absolutely. But in reality, do I walk around this earth like there's no better than me? In real life, like I can't get in the studio with Black Thought and he just give me 90. And I'm sitting there like, I got 25 for you. You know what I mean? Or any one of these amazing rappers. But I think people hear me say it because they don't know me for real. They hear me say it in a verse so much when I have on the cape.
It sounds convincing like a mom.
It sounds convincing because I'm really doing that. That's going to have like, man, he think you think. But the truth is, have I done things that are on that caliber? Absolutely. Like, are there people that'll get in there and smack me? Absolutely. Can I get in that same studio on another given day and smack them around? Absolutely. It's no different than basketball. How many times you done gave 50 or 40 and then turn around and he done gave you 50?
Now, I want to be very clear. This is not to disparage J. Cole. This is not to say that J. Cole is not great, because I believe that J. Cole is great. But it is to say it is very interesting when you start to recognize in the whole grand scheme of authenticity that J. Cole is making it clear. This is a character. Some of these stories are not mine. Like, I'm performing, and not only am I performing, but I'm telling you so that you'll believe it, even though I don't know that I'm it all the time. That's not how Kendrick talks about himself. That's not how Drake talks about himself. And the reality is, the whole idea of the big three is Cole's invention, in my opinion, as far as where it exists on wax. Like, Cole's the first one to talk about the big three between those three artists. He's the one who's like, we the big three, like I started in the league, right? He talks on Heaven's EP, a song that he actually raps on the same beat that Drake did for Pipe Down, about how he's being sent to third and that he's bronze, right? So Cole is kind of developing this idea of where he exists. He's positioned himself in that space. So when Kendrick dropped like that, and Kendrick is like, there is no big three. It's just Big Me. Like, I need you to understand something. I rock with everybody. I pray they my real friends, but if not, I'm YNW Melly. Like, listen, I need y'all to understand something. I like the music y'all make too, but y'all not me, right? Drake is like, I'm the hit maker y'all depend on. They both have rationale and reasons for why they're in this space. So when 7 Minute Drill drops, that's when things get real. And Cole makes it very clear. He is saying stuff on 7 Minute Drill. He don't even believe. He just wants to get this thing off so that no one talks mess about him, about the fact that he ducked smoke, because he had been talking about how if anyone wanted smoke, he would smack them and show them that he's the best. That's what he has been saying on every feature and on every album. And so here we are in the space where he has the opportunity to do it. And this is what he said his mindset was when he wrote 7 Minute Drill.
Let me do my 7 minutes.
Right.
And the whole point of 7 minutes is like, yo, you can't overthink it. Just let it come. Boom, boom, boom. And that's when I start writing the song that became like 7 Minute Drill, which in my mind, as I'm writing it, what I had already kind of subscribed to myself is like, all right, this is what I do.
Right.
Like this my nigga. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm worried about what the world gonna say, which is embarrassing to say out loud, but it's true. You know what I mean? Like at that time, because I'm fearful that this thing that I worked on for so long will go unappreciated if I don't.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, this is what I do.
Right.
Let me say just enough.
Right.
To where it looked like I did, you know, like it looked like I said something. Everything I'm saying to him, I know, and he know it's all survivable. You know what I mean? It's nothing I'm hitting him. I'm not hitting no fatal blows, but it'll be just enough to be like, all right, nigga.
You said something.
Said, now you gonna come back. I know this is my man. He gonna come back. He gonna say something. You know what I mean?
Right.
Probably give me a line or two or give me a whatever.
Right.
And I'm gonna be like, you got that? Cool. Now let's get to this.
So he was just trying to get it done because he didn't actually want to do the smoke. And then he bowed out by himself. No one told J. Cole to bow out of the beef.
You said
Giving you
something
the
about
heads
up? Heads
no,
up.
Schoolboy Q, that's a complete lie.
Okay.
Ask Schoolboy Q. That's just like internet, like, yo, that's a straight lie. And there's many of those.
And honestly, I respect Cole for backing out of the beef. I, being real, don't know why he was there in the first place. And I'm saying this as respectfully as possible. J. Cole is an incredible artist. He will go down as one of the best artists of this generation, bar none. And when it comes to the guys in hip hop, the reality is there's only two. Like at the end of the day, when we're talking about cultural impact, we're talking about ubiquity. We're talking about those two guys. Kendrick and Drake both have at least 5 songs that everyone knows. Everyone. You could play them at a wedding. You could play them at a bar mitzvah. You could play them at a sporting event. You could play it in your backyard. You could play it at a school dance. They each got at least 5 joints that everybody knows. And that doesn't mean that J. Cole hasn't made great music. He just hasn't had the cultural impact across the board that these two guys have. And so at the end of the day, Drake and Kendrick going at it made sense. And Kendrick prevailing made sense from a rapping standpoint. I want to be very clear. I never thought Drake was going to disappear because he has ubiquity. Like the reality is that no matter what people think about Drake or if they believe the allegations or not, I know when that hotline bling, that can only mean one thing. Like, I've been downtown whipping on my way to you. The reality is, it's God's plan. Like, these songs, like Drake's got songs that just are not going to disappear. And that's what we're going to be till it's over, but it's far from over. Right? And like when we talk about Kendrick, he got royalty, got loyalty inside his DNA. They was singing we gonna be all right at BLM protests. These two men have ubiquity. And so when we get down to it, what we're left with is the reality is that the two men who should have participated in the battle participated. And the one man who didn't is now trying to explain himself. He's trying to explain the dichotomy between J. Cole and Jermaine. Because on 7 Minute Drill and on a lot of features for a long time, J. Cole was writing checks that Jermaine did not want to cash. And now Jermaine is running around on podcasts trying to help everyone understand why he didn't mean what J. Cole said. And I'm just like, that's fine. Fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't put the blame on you. But at the end of the day, First things first, rest in peace, Uncle Phil. This has been For the Record. Before we go, we've covered a lot of ground here. This has been great. Before we go, one last thing. We are in a spot right now. It is the midterms. If you follow me on any socials, you know that I will not shut up about the midterms because this is the most important election of our lives. And you were probably like, Wayne, you said that in 2024. Clearly, I was right in 2024 that it was the most important election of our lives. And had y'all voted for that lady, we wouldn't be in this situation. That's beside the point. The reality is that Donald Trump is afraid of us. He's afraid of what we're going to do at the polls in the midterms. He is afraid of the fact that Republicans are going to lose because all the things they're doing are deeply unpopular. And so what he has attempted to do was force the Senate to pass the SAVE Act. Because, remember, like I said earlier in this episode, Mike Johnson is just there to do what Donald Trump wants. So the SAVE Act passed the House, but they do not have the votes in the Senate. You don't have the votes. You don't have the votes. Ah, ha, 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 ha. You're going to need congressional approval, and you don't have the votes. So instead of trying to wait for the process or realizing that not having the votes means the law can't pass, Donald Trump signed an executive order yesterday that outlined a whole new set of things around mail-in ballots. Because if you've heard him talk over the last several months, if we have mail-in, we're the only country in the world with mail-in ballots, which is not true. If you have mail-in ballots, it's not a real election, but he just voted by mail in a special election in Florida. So the reality is this particular executive order, a reminder, executive orders are not laws. The executive orders do direct federal agencies to operate in certain ways. So this particular executive order sets a federal voter list. And so what it does is it directs federal agencies to create a national database of quote unquote verified US citizens that is a cross between DHS and SSA. So they'll collect this group of quote unquote verified citizens. And then he's instructing the United States Postal Service to only send these ballots to verified citizens, which would then shrink the number of people who potentially could receive mail-in ballots. And then tells the federal government, DHS and SSA, to share that information with states, so states will only send out or allow the people that the federal government has verified to vote. Now, here's an important point. The federal government is not in charge of state elections. And when the federal government does get involved, it's because Congress passes a law. But the president of the United States cannot shape how local elections are run. And so in theory, a state could just say, first off, F your B in the click you claim. And yet, in this executive order, there are some veiled threats around if states do not comply, that they will lose funding, which we know the Trump administration is famous for. Like I said, I live in the state of Minnesota. They tried to cut agricultural funding. They tried to cut funding for DHS. They tried to cut funding for Medicare and Medicaid. Like, they're always threatening and trying to cut funding. So here's the reality, is that the Trump administration is attempting to steal this election by making it more difficult to vote. They have also tried to steal this election by pushing red states to redistrict in order to shrink the number of potential seats that are available. He's also trying to steal the election by threatening to have ICE agents out at polling places. It is supremely important that we recognize that Republicans are terrified of us showing up to vote. And that is exactly what we have to do. I don't care what's happening around us. We need to make sure everyone around us is registered. We need to make sure everyone around us shows up to vote. When we show up, we do better. And so I love that we were out protesting this past weekend. I love that we're vocal on socials. I love that people are out here saying all kinds of crazy things and making the jokes and the memes and everything. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump is trying to prevent us from voting. And we can be mad about it. But in the words of Barack Obama,
don't boo, vote.
We've got one job in November. We have to show up. And I'm grateful that you showed up to be with me today. You could have been in the world, but you're here with me. And I'm grateful. This has been Let's Be Clear with Just Wayne. I'm Just Wayne. You can follow me anywhere on any of these socials. We'll be back here next week talking about whatever's happening in the world. And until then, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I love y'all. Peace.
There is nothing that I wouldn't do.
Boy, you your attention, please? Can I have your attention, please? Everybody just look at me. Everybody just look at me. A day trade attention. Shout out to Gary V. Respond to every mention. You can find me on your FYP. Before 2020, I was doing the